Okay, we're going to get started here. So a few people. All right, well, welcome to Women in the Industry Developing Film, Television, and OTT About Women, the Golden Age in Hollywood and Indie Production. Okay, but before I start, I'd like to introduce and have our sponsors from Alliance of Women in Media have a quick chat.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annette Covarrubias.
And I'm Tina Rubin, and we're the co-presidents of Alliance for Women in Media, SoCal. We're a local chapter of a national nonprofit organization that has been around from way, way, way back in 1952. And we are here as advocates for women in media. We do this through education and acting as a resource for our members and the industry. We do things like networking events throughout the year, and we also give away scholarships to women.
So right after this panel, we'll have our membership meeting in Mixer right next door in 171. And tomorrow night, we're hosting our AWM SoCal Celebrates scholarship recipients and film winners. So we'll be showcasing and screening the films that were awarded this year. And we'll be presenting the scholarship winners from local universities with their certificate. So that's pretty much it.
That's open to all
That's
of
open
you.
to everybody. So it's tomorrow in room 171 next door from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I would like to first start off with, well, thank you all for coming and joining. And we have a great, distinguished group of women here. Hopefully you guys get a chance to see their bios, and I'll let them have a few words about what they do and who they are. But because this is Women in the Industry, we collectively, as a group here, had an offline conversation. We wanted to address the Weinstein storyline and what we want to do with that in this panel. We want to acknowledge, of course, this is a real issue, and that this is nothing new, and it's rampant in the industry. But what we have decided as a group is to really focus on how, in this particular revolution and evolution of technology and media and content and film, we want to focus on how the OTT is really knocking down barriers and other dysfunctions, and that levels the playing field for everyone else, and to really empower not only just women but and the others, I'll say. So without further ado, I'm going to start at the very end here, and we'll start with introductions. So, yes.
Hi. I guess I'll do this. I'm Tina Becker. I'm a casting director. Are we just saying our name and
your name?
and just
a
a little
bit about who
background?
You are. Yeah,
So
background.
I was an actor since I was a child, and eventually got into directing theater. Went to Northwestern for their wonderful theater program, and as many actors do in their 20s, waited tables and struggled keeping myself creative. And a little over 13 years ago, changed my life, changed my career, came out to LA and got into casting. And it's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So
That's
is
perfect.
that good? Okay.
Lovely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katrina Wolf. I currently work at AG Studios, which is a finance and production company run by Alex Garcia, who's a big Latin American entertainment mogul. Before that, for 10 years, I worked at the Weinstein Company, Dimension Films, as a senior VP of production and casting. So I actually also had a little bit of a casting background that was sort of put into, but now I'm more, it's sort of like an indie producer, but with a job. So I really, I kind of have, I have a great, opportunity now. I'm able to sort of bring in kind of the projects that I want to work on, and I have a great boss and partner who kind of allows me that freedom. So I focus on films 10 million and under, and they're just starting to sort of get into television now.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were doing like a full, can I just add something?
Yes,
Sorry, I
please,
thought,
feel free.
I thought we were
Feel
doing like
free.
the back,
Yes,
just a
yes.
little bit of like how we got into it. I don't know why I got confused. Let me just actually tell you a little bit about what I actually do, not what I did as a kid. I'm an independent casting director. I mostly work in features, but I have started to sort of break into the digital world, the digital space, as well as some television. I, for a stint, was the manager of feature casting at Paramount Pictures, so I've been both in the studio as well as independent. I've worked on the biggest of budgets, like X-Men Apocalypse, and the smallest of films, like a movie that's currently shooting for $250,000, starring Campbell Scott, here in LA. So I've run the gamut of budgets. Yes, there we go. That's
Thank
what I
you.
wanted to say.
I personally like that child star thing, but I like that. Okay.
My name's Sophia Dilly. I run development and production for a production company called Route One Entertainment, where we've been predominantly in the $10 to $35 million space, with a few movies that go above and a few movies that are under. We just started working in television as well. I'm sure everyone here is going to say that. And I went to film school at Loyola Marymount University. I started in the business working for Pete Berg on Hancock, and then worked on Battleship with him. And then I worked at Route One. I left Route One, and then I came back. So it's been great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Feldman. I'm a director and a writer. I work in film and television and branded entertainment. I'm currently in development with a feature film about fair pay activist Lily Ledbetter, and a television pilot that I just sold to E1 Television.
Hi, I'm Jamie Burke. I am co-owner and president of Lifeboat Productions. We are a full-service production company. We also just recently launched Toffee Productions, which is a female-focused, provocative female stories, originals division.
Hi, I'm Laverne McKinnon. I'm a television producer and an executive and life coach, and I have been in television all my life, ever since I grew up in Illinois, and there were no restrictions in terms of how much TV I could watch. I think I've had a variety of different roles. I most recently executive produced the Netflix series Girl Boss, and I think one of my guiding principles is always to combine the creative with strategy, working left brain and right brain hand in hand.
And a fellow Northwestern alum, right?
Yes,
go
a
Cats.
fellow Wildcat.
Hi, my name's Margaret Laney. I'm the co-head of marketing at independent studio Gunpowder and Sky. It was founded a couple years ago by Van Toffler and Floris Bauer, and we produce, finance, distribute, and acquire content independent of form, genre, or length. We're platform agnostic, and so if it from 90 seconds to 90 minutes, we are interested in that kind of content. I'm so excited to be here today with the fellow women who are taking over. The future is female.
And I'll just do a quick intro of myself. My name is Denise Maiko. I am the CEO and founder of StratusCore. StratusCore is a platform, it's a digital content creation platform that enables, actually, before I even go there, I'm going to ask a question. How many are in the content creation, I would say more in the content creation freelance business? Who are freelancers here? Okay, there's a lot of you guys. And how many are in small SMBs, like the small business, like they're in a company, it's a small business? Okay. And then who are the big, anyone from the big company? No one wants to raise their hand, okay. Okay, so basically what StratusCore is that it is a digital content creation platform, and it brings all of those very expensive tools to the cloud, and we basically pull together the freelance and the SMB, or the small medium business, and the large companies together in a marketplace, and provide a safe environment, secure environment for content to be basically created and made. So that's a little bit about us. And so I'm going to move through to what our very kind of first question, what are we doing here? So, we talk about this is the year of the woman. I don't know if you guys have seen, I'm sure you guys have seen all of the, I think it's New York Times and LA Times, and there's a lot of being written right now about what happened, what transpired in the Emmys. This kind of, this term of the year of the woman, I'm curious from this panel, and I really want to hear from everyone, so I'd love to kind of keep this somewhat short and sweet, but because I think it's important to hear from everyone. You guys all have different backgrounds. Do you agree or disagree with this concept of year of the woman and that we are now kind of overcoming sexism and ageism? I'm gonna
start down here? Are we just going to go down the row?
Just, you can go down the row, you can mix it up.
Because I work predominantly in features, features are way behind. Television is always more progressive than the feature world is. So no, I don't see a lot of progress on the feature ends. And I think, yes, finally people are able to start some conversations that they were maybe afraid to have before, but I'm not convinced yet that the resolution is here yet.
I also work primarily in features, and yes, the progress is slow. I do think we're at this sort of tipping point, and I think the first part of it is just that it's on everyone's mind, and there are articles about it, and people are talking about it and thinking about it and noting when there's an exception, you know, and there's Wonder Woman and there's Hidden Figures, and there is some incremental progress, but I do feel like there's more of a momentum, just more in the way people are thinking about it, and it's going to lag. The actual progress will lag behind a bit, but even from 2015 to 2016, if you look at, you know, sort of just the raw data, yeah, the numbers are way behind, you know, in terms of men versus women behind and in front of the camera, but there was a marked progression, so we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think I actually feel like it's very dangerous to start calling it the year of the woman, because it gives this sense that, oh, we've solved the problem, and it hasn't been solved. We all are acknowledging that. I'm sure we're going to continue to acknowledge it, but I think that having worked in features as well, you get the sense, and there's the sense from other male producers like, well, now it's solved. It's like it's not solved, and so you have to. And I think the change comes from everyone on this panel and other places to actively make decisions and continuing to have that conversation and trying to steer away from this is the year where it was solved, because it's not going to happen that quickly.
And before Rachel answers, I'm going to throw another curveball, is to say why. The why. Why is this? So I want to know why.
Because we live in a patriarchy.
I mean, that was a short answer. Elaboration.
We do. We live in a puritanical patriarchy, and we're all fighting. We're all fighting that in various forms. And as a director, and I can speak for the activism that I've been involved in for the last 25 years, that I do see that there is some small change, and it's very much for the positive. But for women behind the camera, for directors and cinematographers, statistics are really not much better than they have been before. And there's a lot of talk about pipeline and new directors, but there isn't a lot of talk about mid-career directors, and there are thousands of us who could equalize the statistics overnight if anybody really cared. So I think it's nice to say, but it's a bunch of bullshit.
There you said it. And so one of the other things I want to make it really clear too, I think most of us may know what OTT means, and we had this little discussion before about, you know, does everyone know what it means? And it's kind of this kind of bizarre, technical, but ambiguous term, and it's over the top, right? So Netflix, Hulu. I just want to kind of confirm what that means, and then to add on to the further question, there's what is the OTT doing anything about, you know, carving out more opportunities for women?
Sure. So first, going back a little bit to the Year of the Women banner that's being flag that's being waved. The award ceremonies tend to be very reactionary. Mm-hmm. As you'll notice in the previous years, there was a lack of ethnicity recognition in the Oscars. and then Moonlight won. It was very reactionary, and it was wonderful, and it's absolutely the direction things need to be headed, and it's great. But that does not mean, as everyone's saying, that the problem is solved. I think that the women, it's finally been recognized with our marches and all of that they need to be recognized. And the award ceremonies did honor quite a few within the Emmys. And absolutely, that is a lot of achievement. It's a lot to be proud of. And with the rare exception, though, most of those award winners were male-driven behind the scenes. So there's still a lot of work to be done. To your question about OTT doing its part and having a place and a say, absolutely. I think it's a lower risk platform or ground, fertile ground for filmmakers. So it's a great place to start, and it's a great place to cut your teeth and get the chops to then hopefully rise within the traditional systems. And therefore, with lower risk comes greater opportunity. So I think it's a fantastic place for people to get into the ground floor, make a difference, be heard. So more women there, the better.
I'm going to tackle part of the why question, which unconscious belief, unconscious bias. And there are a lot of studies around that, and I think that plays a significant role in the why we haven't seen more changes. I've been incredibly fortunate in my career, in my life, that I've had so many people who've advocated for me, a lot of them being women, and so I haven't experienced a lot of what other women have, because I think I've been really fortunate in working with people who've tackled their own unconscious biases and beliefs, and I think that that's something that we all need to do on an individual basis, that there's this amazing awareness that's going on, but until we figure out what's going on inside of us that draws us to be comfortable, and I think that's just part of the human nature, is we don't like to be outside our comfort zone, and so hiring someone who's not the same color or the same gender or the same demographic or same background or same economic background, it feels uncomfortable. And so that's what we have to start to look at within ourselves.
I'm going to yes and everyone here, but I am going to say something a little different. Yes, totally understand that there is still an imbalance of power, especially behind the camera, but I do think that it's extremely positive and sort of representative of a larger narrative that we as women should be embracing, which is, yes, this is the year of the woman. It should have been a millennia before, but let's let this be this sort of jumping off point. And, I think about not only in television, but I mean, Wonder Woman was the hit of the summer. The Beguiled, we have a movie coming out called Tragedy Girls, starring two young women who, and it's just, it feels like the tide is changing. And so I think it's easy for us who've been in this business and who have, really come up against a lot in terms of just sort of gender inequality. I think it's easy to be like, well, yes, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, no shit, there's a lot of work to be done, but let's count this as a big win. And in this sort of media spin culture that we live in, let's just ride that and continue to amplify it and and take it further and sort of and use it as sort of the metaphor through which we're influencing more female equality. And just one more point. My husband is a manager, and it's so funny because he, in terms of signing, he's like, all I need right now is a female director of color. Like, I cannot, there's literally such desire for people wanting the right director for the right role. So and that's a very different narrative than 3 years ago. So it's like, at least I'm feeling like, yes, this is maybe bubbling up. This is maybe the tipping point. So I just want us to be like, yeah, here's an opening. Let's just now charge through.
And what does that look like, charging through? What does it look like for tomorrow? What's going to happen tomorrow? So we're reactionary. We heard from the panel, we're reacting. Sometimes the awards that we react, they react. If it's dealing with diversity, there's the focus. Moonlight wins. What does that mean to continue to charge through and run through? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a narrative standpoint, it means just continuing to push forward, but I mean, continuing to invest in development of projects helmed by female writers and directors. I think for Gunpowder and Sky, it's really looking at all of our projects with sort of that eye and saying, okay, well, can there be a female character? Does this have to be a male character? And welcoming those voices in. And then also really, I mean, I live in the world of marketing. I think leaning into connecting with female audience members. They're a very powerful demographic. And so if the wins of the Wonder Womans of the world, I think, set an amazing precedent for, wow, that was amazing. Set an amazing precedent for how, the bottom line of projects, actually work. So I think financially, as long as we are investing in projects that continue to make money, which is, the series that have done so well for these networks like HBO, Wonder Woman, which was a box office smash. It just shows that female stories, there is a financial incentive to continue to fund them.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point, and that leads me to the next question, which is about financing. Financing film either made for women, made by women, right? So I do want to either have Katrina and have you guys, have some of you answer that question about financing. And I'll make it even more specific. With respect to financing, there's traditional film financing, and now there's OTT. How are these different? And where is there the opportunity? We talked about the lower cost for OTT, and does that? I'll let you go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I come more from the traditional film background, but anytime you can lower costs, your freedom increases in terms of how you can cast, how you can, crew up. I think, to kind of go back to what we were talking about before, I really think the key, at least in film, is the directors, because all of the data kind of shows us that as soon as there's a female director, then there's a much bigger chance of all the other department heads being female and of there being a female protagonist and so forth. So in terms of the financing side of it, it's interesting. I don't necessarily, it depends on the genre, but I don't necessarily find that specifically there's resistance from financiers based on that as much as on what you run into, at least in the international film finance, is a lot more to do with genre and with which does I suppose by extension sometimes then cut out like sort of the character-driven dramas and things like that, because people want genre movies and things that sell. But you really run into it in terms of ethnicity. We still have that sort of and Tineke faces that a lot. In terms of diversity, there's a lot of resistance for foreign sales and so forth. But yeah, I would imagine, and again, I don't have any experience putting together an OTT, but film finance is sort of this dinosaur, and it's very driven by foreign sales, and you kind of have to cobble together all of your sources. And I would imagine, television's different as well, and I would imagine OTT, there's a possibility for a more direct route to financing in places like Gunpowder and Sky, that where you can kind of do it all under one roof, whereas that's increasingly rare in film, and you're increasingly having to cobble together equity from different sources.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll, to go off of that, having done both sides now of financing for the OTTs and financing for foreign sales, what you end up finding is, the foreign sales driven films are in the monster, and they're moving slowly, and they are making changes, but it's subtle, and you still have these conversations where it's like, well, they're not bankable, or they're not this, and that diversity across the board is impacted by that, and it's a challenge. I think that model's changing. I know the last time we've all got together and discussed this, I talked about how I think that model is slowly dying out, and with the OTTs coming in and more independent financiers taking bigger risks because they know there's more buyers on the market who can purchase more interesting niche content. Like, you know, with Tallulah, that was a movie that we had and was female-driven across the board, female department heads, female director, female producers. And it was, it's a wonderful film, and it fits into that world, and it's an opportunity. And I think Netflix, Amazon, they're going to go, are we going to make our filmmaker happy? They're driven more by where can we fit the data in. And I think what you were saying about the market of women and how many people are in that audience, being 50% of the population and more. It's like there's this mirror. They're like, oh, we discovered there's a whole other audience. I hear that a lot. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I'm glad you discovered it. So it's not been in front of you the whole time. So I think that data merge is really going to help mend and mind that gap. But it's a slow change. So
you must on the comment of finance.
I just wanted to say really quickly that my experience in terms of working with Netflix and HBO and Showtime and Hulu and all of the premium OTT players is that gender doesn't have anything to do with how the project is being financed, what the budget is. It's about the auspices. And that's just a hard truth, is that it's still an incredibly auspice-driven business. And so being able to package your script, package your idea with a proven player, whether it's a producer, an actor, or a director, that's the thing that's key. It's not about gender.
Thank you, that's great.
Yes, but how do you get women into those places who may not have the auspices that are traditional? That's really the key that we need to challenge.
And does the OTT
allow for that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is the question. And
Yeah.
so I kind of, as we kind of piecemeal some of these things together and make a summary of it, it does appear that the OTT is offering, I'm going to just call it out, the three things, which is typically a lower budget, which means there's more opportunity and there's more quantity. So therefore,
Which OTTs are you thinking about when you say lower budget?
Well, I'll rephrase that. Meaning there's more of a diverse range of financing. Mm-hmm. Meaning it doesn't matter if it's, you know, so someone made the comment that well, the OTT can also offer, there's just a larger platform with lower risk. So when I hear the word risk, I think about money and finance. And
there are separate tiers of OTT.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
more and more.
I think we need to clarify that.
Yeah, and to clarify for the audience,
Yep.
if you're talking Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, they're often spending cable at least money, so
Yeah, or more.
Or more.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
right.
it's very much a line of television with higher end OTTs
Yes.
that's blurring.
Yes.
So, and it is great that they are usually genderless or specific
Yes.
on their. But you're right, it's the package and who
Yep.
has the clout to carry it over the finish line. You do have the Go 90s, the full screens, the Vice. There are quite a few lower tier OTTs, which are what I'm talking about
Right.
like the much lower
the
risk.
lower risk.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. That was good.
I just wanted to sort of throw my 2 cents in, just based on my own personal experience. I very recently cast a pilot that was for a digital company, and that was the lead of the pilot, and it was developed for a web star, a massively huge, sensational web star, who happens to be female. And they had a shoestring budget. They basically had like the equivalent of an ultra low budget, you know, SAG film, to make this pilot. This company would not greenlight the series. They wanted to see the pilot first. And they did promise that if we could get a certain caliber of actor for the supporting roles, that they may consider some breakage, you know, some additional money beyond the $125 a day that they pay on ultra low budgets. And so I did my job, and I got a lot of actors and agents interested, knowing that there would be maybe a little bit of money. And I'm not talking about anything that's going to break this big company's bank. I'm talking about something that's beyond what the actual budget of the pilot could support. A few $1,000s instead of $250 for 2 days of work, you know, maybe a couple thousand. And when we went to go get approval, they said, oh no, we're not going to give you any money. And nobody wanted to take a pie in the face with the agents and say, oh, guess what? So-and-so actually has decided not to put any money in. It was going to make everybody look bad. And so the producers were smart, and they redid their budget and scraped together a little bit of money from their actual shoestring budget to still be able to pay these wonderful actors that they were excited to get a little bit extra, because that's what was promised to them to even come in and, you know, read for it or read the script. And it was interesting to me, and I said to the filmmakers, I think what's going on, I don't know for sure, haven't been in any of your conversations, but I think what's going on is that they want to test her brand. They don't want to spend a dime until her brand is tested. And if the pilot goes well, because they're going to air the pilot no matter what, if the pilot goes well, then hopefully you'll be able to get some money and make a series. But until that happens, they don't want to spend a dime. That was my assumption. And it made me wonder, would this same scenario have happened if it was a guy, a web star male, at the center of this series? Would they have pulled the reins that tight on a few $1,000s? I don't think so. We'll never know. We'll never have that answer. But it really made me wonder.
And that kind of leads into what kind of stories should be told or need to be told that would basically enable this kind of financing or this kind of story. So I wanted to kind of talk about what are the stories that need to be told in this next, we'll call it the next coming
Well,
year.
can I also say this?
Yes.
Katrina and I right now are working on a film. It's one of the most beautiful scripts I've ever read in 13 years in the film industry. I've actually been on it even longer than her. It's a female-driven drama, which is the hardest to get financed. The second lead, the second most important role, is also female, which makes it even tougher to get financed. And it's the kind of movie that needs to be made. It should be made. There's diversity in the script and characters being presented in a light that we don't typically see in the stereotypes that their ethnicity is usually presented in. So there's so many reasons why this movie needs to be made. I don't care if it was yesterday, today, tomorrow. It just is a story that should be told, and it's a beautiful script. I've now been on it for over 2 years. Katrina, you've been on it for maybe half a year. We actually now have an actress attached to it who is willing to get attached to it without any kind of money offer. And I know things are moving in a very positive direction, but we still can't make the movie. You can talk to, because I don't get involved with that side. That's all Katrina. But.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is always, in terms of it, especially in terms of attracting female audiences, is just the complexity of the characters, you know, interesting, complex female characters. I read something really interesting that noted that they did a study, a global study, and fictional, I think, TV and film characters that are women, a lower percentage of them actually were portrayed as working, you know, and having a specific job that you can recognize and see that they're doing, than are in the global workforce as women, and it's very hard for women to connect with that, I think. But to go back to, that's just something I wanted to bring up, but I actually did produce a Netflix movie, and to echo what Laverne said, I find that it's pretty agnostic in terms of the gender stuff. I found, at least with Netflix, it was more driven by, it seemed to be driven by genre, because romantic comedies and science fiction are the two things, specifically romantic comedies, that they told me always get clicks, always, you know, I'll get views around the world. So, and they didn't care as much about the cast. They cared more about the producers. They didn't care, and it was a lower budget, and they fully financed it. Like very similar to Tallulah, I think, or sort of. Similar budget, yeah, I think. And yeah, so that freedom was incredible and liberating. You know, it's kind of stunning coming from this world of, you know, usually piecing together and having to do, you know, to attach actors and run sales estimates and things like that. It was just sort of this really quick, clean, kind of route. So that.
It's rare though. It's
Yeah,
so
because
rarity.
right, it's very rare. It's only in those big ones like Netflix, and they have sort of Amazon. They have sort of unlimited, in a sense, resources. So again, and they have so much data. So they go back and they do their calculations based on whatever they have, and they come back and tell you yes or no, and it's on. So it's very different.
Yeah, I can speak a little to this too. I've dealt with the higher end and the lower end, and it's not easier on the lower end in terms of the casting, I would say. So to answer your question, I don't think that was gender related whatsoever. They absolutely are trying to figure out if influencers and their numbers translate to views of filmed entertainment, period, because there's not a lot of data on that currently. And you would be, if they would just give me the money they spend on concocting these algorithms to make their content, like, I think we'd all be better off. But it's a weird thing, because they're tech-driven companies typically that are funding these things. And so you look at them and you're like, you have the money, but their idea is that they're creating a fertile ground to play in, and so they want to take more risks than to put it all on the line than some of the other companies are.
And by the way, for this particular one, I knew that was the big part of the conversation was what she does online, is it going to translate into scripted? That's the given. I just really it just was really curious to me.
Yeah.
Would these conversations be exactly the same? Would they be word for word exactly the same? Would we have been shut down financially 100%?
And it's hard to know.
Would they have given a little if it was a man and not a woman? I don't know.
I'm guessing their algorithm knows, but we won't. Yeah.
Rachel, I don't know if you had a comment about that.
No, I just have a story a little bit. So in my journey with my Lily Ledbetter movie, which is now in its 6th year, and I've been through 3 different sets of producers, and I'm now with an amazing, great fit and wonderful producers. The film, Lily Ledbetter, is the woman who the Fair Pay Act was named after by President Obama. She was a tire factory worker at the Goodyear Tire Factory. And it's a beautiful movie and an important movie and a movie that needs to get made now. And I wrote the script that's primarily focused on her years when she's around 60 years old. And these producers who I have, all 3 sets of them, these are major studio producers, and the budget is between the $8 and $12 million range. And I'm directing the picture. And their goal has always been to get a very high-profile, foreign sales-worthy actor, one, to support the financing, but also to balance this unknown non-celebrity director who's attached to this project. And it's really sort of hamstringing us because the actors that are acceptable in this pool are minute, and they're all very young. So we're submitting this beautiful script to well-known actors who are all acknowledging that it's a beautiful script, but it's not really the right fit because they're too young. She's a grandmother in the movie. And as many times as I say to my producers, this is for an older woman, unless it's Meryl Streep or maybe Helen Mirren, there really is nobody else. So I'm involved in a very interesting conundrum, but it really does make me wonder, especially with a film that may not have any foreign sales at all. It's an American story. Why are we chasing this foreign sales dream that's antiquated and anti-female and all of these things? But I think until my producers are there, I can only push them so far.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point, because the hard truth is that foreign sales equal recouping the investment of the film, and so it's a very difficult.
It's a tricky wick.
It is very, very tricky. Yeah, absolutely.
And so does the OTT, does that help at all?
Well, that's interesting, because I recently had a meeting with one of these bigger OTT companies, and I pitched the project, and this was in March, and they were wild about it. And they said, this is it, we know you're producers, we love this story. And then it took them a couple of months to actually read the script and get back to my producers. And in those 3 or 4 months, they completely changed their mandate. Right. They now want huge stars. They're not, I was talking about sort of an A- star who's perfect, and he was excited in the room, but 3 or 4 months later, they had changed their mandate. So I don't know.
I think if you lower the budget significantly, it helps
Yes,
your
I agree.
chance. Unfortunately, yeah.
I agree,
mean,
and I'm very
across
open
the
to
board. The international market for film, especially right now, is, sales companies are assuming like 50% of their takes rather than 75. Like it's happening. So
Yeah.
everybody's
Absolutely.
finding creative ways to lower the budgets.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to, we talked about some of the stories that should be told and need to be told. Let's talk about roles behind the camera and what are the roles behind the camera that will transition or that you see transitioning to women that hadn't been before. What roles? I mean, what is their role?
You mean on the technical side?
Could be, so anything behind. So it could be producer, director.
I'll just say that I feel like the role that I find difficult to fill with a woman is the role of DP. I feel like most other roles, there's a wonderful pool of women, but I feel like DPs, there are very few female DPs.
There are quite a few.
There are.
That is I so appreciate that. I just know that in my search, those names haven't come up.
That's
and
so fascinating
yeah.
to me because so many of the movies I've worked on have had women DPs, and
I'm not saying that they
very
don't exist.
rarely see a female writer.
It is a fine pool, though.
I think though, if you look at like makeup artists, wardrobe designers, ADs, when you're looking at percentage-wise, gender, again, I don't know this statistically, but.
I think it's a question of organization, and I think the DPs have been getting very organized. There are ways to find them. Yeah, and there are several of those. So you can find them.
I don't know that I've ever, probably I have, but I can't remember a time that I've worked on a project with a female writer. Again, I'm mostly in features.
Oh my God! And I would say, there's so many amazing female writers. So everybody has a different perspective.
Yeah. So
And that's feature and TV, honestly.
So that's a really good point. Is that's feature and TV.
But how many female showrunners? Because that's still an issue, right? I mean,
I feel like there's so many female showrunners.
But it's a smaller 23%.
I want to find more. I mean, I feel like we have a few projects we're developing and it's an issue.
Yeah.
We have a hard time finding them.
I think showrunners in general, though, are difficult to secure. I mean, that's the difficulty.
They're all on two
So
hands.
other resources, like, I don't know if you guys use IMDb. There's someone mentioned out in the audience that there are organizations. Is that where do you guys? Is this more word of mouth? Is it still kind of word of mouth, or what do you think is needed in order for there to be kind of bubble up to the top, almost like The Voice in a way? You don't know, it could be a guy, it could be a girl, you kind of generally know what it is, but the concept is just looking at someone's resume or someone's work without knowing gender. I'm just kind of curious, where do you find, what's your source of people?
In terms of writers, the Writers Guild Diversity Department is very helpful. And Terry Lopez, who runs the diversity department, it would be very helpful. Glenn Mazzara, who runs many of the show-running programs, would be happy to be helpful in terms of writers and showrunners. The Directors Guild, sadly, is not as supportive of their diversity. They try to be, but there are many organizations, from Film Fatales and WIMPs and Alliance of Women Directors. There are many organizations, if you do a Google search, and for cinematographers as well, we can be found.
I would take it a step further back, though. Honestly, that it's wonderful that all these resources to find people exist and they're there for when we go looking. But chances are that all of us, the onus is on us to start breeding and training and giving opportunities to other females in order for them to get the skills to then be able to go to the table and present and be part of it.
And I would also add, in my end, I often use, for below the line, like editors, DPs, I use agents, agencies. At that level, once somebody is, up and coming or has, enough body of work to be represented, I feel like some initiatives sort of in the below the line area, the way that some diversity initiatives are happening on casting and directors and writers would be helpful, because if you know, if I go and call an agent, I say, hey, I have this project, and they send me resumes and reels. I watch every single one, and if they push and just say, look, this woman is great, even if she doesn't have as much, you know, if they really are more aggressive on that end, and it's about getting in the room too, you know, making that cut. And I find especially less experienced directors, they just kind of look by credits, and I try to get them past that, and that's part of my job as a producer too.
Mm-hmm. I would like to speak a little bit about the agency piece, because as a member of the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild who's been in rooms with, you know, hundreds, thousands. I was the chair of the Women's Steering Committee at the Directors Guild, and I'm very involved with the women's group at the Writers Guild as well. You'd be surprised at how many sophisticated, you know, super experienced, Emmy Award-winning, Oscar-winning female writers and directors are not represented. It's incredible. So the agencies are really culpable in this piece as well.
Well, that goes to casting. I know we talked a little bit about casting, and I do want to kind of talk just a few minutes about, you know, we saw with Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman, you know, winning with Big Little Lies at the Emmys. What kind of roles do you see? And this is maybe for the OTT folks, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, specifically working in casting. For women, and let's talk about ageism, around 40, 50 years old, and north, I'd like to know. I know we had some comment about if it's not Helen Mirren or if it's not Meryl Streep, now what?
So let's talk about the ageism first. You know, it's a really tricky conversation because I have a different movie that I'm working on. We're trying to stay right around $1.5 million, $2 million budget. It is not a first-time director, and he's passionate. His first movie and this movie both star women over the age of 50. And in fact, this one is a couple. She's in her 50s, he's in his 70s, and he's passionate about telling stories about people in the third act of their life. And the script is wonderful, and they're offering more money than typically a budget like this could afford for a lead, but it's reasonable. It's not as much as A-list actors make, but it's not embarrassing. And we have gone to so many women, and they've all passed. And there's been a few that there was one that we actually got a meeting in. She was intrigued enough to meet, and there were scheduling issues, and she's also known to be sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out always. And, you know, you sort of talk in the casting community, oh yeah, I lost so-and-so. Oh, who hasn't? You know? And the interesting thing, it's a little frustrating because we read over and over again, all these women, there's never, you know, these good roles don't come to me. Just looking for good roles. And so it is a little confusing sometimes to be offering good roles and getting a lot of passes.
What has their feedback been?
You know, sometimes you can't tell because you don't know if it's getting blocked at the agency a little bit or if they truly just didn't respond to it. Look, is the script the best script I've ever read? It's maybe not the best, but it's really good, better than most out there. And the character is certainly phenomenal, both the male and the female characters. And the agents, actually, there's been a lot of support from the agencies, to be honest. And so it's been a little confusing. You know, we're not paying A-list star money, and I know that comes into it, and people do get nervous about a $1.5 million movie and what's that going to mean in terms of accommodations and how are they going to travel me and will I have this and that and this and that, and some egos come into play and whatever, but it's the reality of the business. And they're dedicating five weeks of their shooting life, but more because of promotion and prep and whatever, and they do obviously concern themselves with these things, but it is a little frustrating to know that these women want so badly to work on great pieces, and yet there's something's still not connecting, and I don't know what it is and what the answer is there. To answer your other question about the kinds of roles that we see coming in, it is very rare. I don't care if it's the lead of your script, the supporting role. It is very rare to get a script with a prominent female character, lead or supporting, that in their opening description, the first time we see them, there isn't some descriptive word that either says sexy or beautiful or hot or something to describe their looks and the sort of the sexual energy that they might give off. It is
Are you
maybe
finding that
2%.
with women writers as well? They're still defaulting
See,
to that?
I haven't worked with a lot of women writers. Whereas the male descriptions, sometimes they say handsome or good looking. They do sometimes, but it's not an imperative. And that's...
I'd love to just really quickly tackle ageism, or not even tackle it, but just to say that setting aside the casting part of it, I actually think ageism is probably one of the biggest challenges within the entertainment industry that isn't really brought to the forefront in terms of the way women's issues are. And I do see that across the board, whether it's from a casting perspective, a writing perspective, directors, just it's a huge issue. Just a really, really huge issue.
And what do you think is the reason? Is it because the ideas aren't fresh? Is it because, what is the thing? Is it just because of the number?
I honestly don't know. I really don't get it, because it's people who have this depth of experience and talent and point of view and wisdom, and because they reach a certain age, it impacts their desirability. And it's absolutely astonishing to me, and I don't, maybe someone else has an insight into why, but it's horrific.
I think it actually comes down to money on some level. Like, I think that you reach a tier in your career, and this is just I think it's psychology and systematic, but it's also, I think financially, if you start to reach a certain point where your representatives and everybody around you saying, oh, well, he's done this or she's done this, and it's gotten to this point where you're now unaffordable to the, when you're trying to take risks and lower your budget, you sort of meet this point where you have this person who deserves to get paid a certain level, and financially it becomes an issue. So I think there's financial issues in the transition of trying to fit into these new companies that have, okay, let's lower our budget so we don't have the foreign sales problem, but can we afford our production designer whose cost is far bigger, and they've worked on a $100 million movie yesterday. Can they do a $3 million movie? So I think that issue comes into it.
That's a good point.
Yep, that is a good point. So I'm sorry? Okay. We're going to get to Q&A in just 1 second, but I'm going to have to do, it's about the, okay, please.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I work and champion. Well, yeah, I work and champion and advocate for talented writers of all ages, whether they're 18 or 32, have switched industries and are starting over at 45 or are 78. It's absolutely, but there's it's a frustrating bias.
Yeah,
I want to talking about actors.
I was talking about actors and more on a crew. If you reach a point where you're doing every one of Spielberg's movies as a crew member, you're probably getting paid a huge amount of money as a DP or a production designer. So I'm talking about that tier and the casting tier. I totally agree. And I am a champion as well. Like, I try to meet everybody of every age, every ethnicity, every gender. That's what we have to do. I think your point of it's the onus is on us, that you have to acknowledge that the problem exists, and you have to then address it by actively living what you want to see the change.
And I think a lot of these newer companies especially, they want such quote unquote edgy content. They want cutting edge, and there's an unconscious bias, to go back to what you brought up earlier, that only young, fresh people can tell those stories, which is not, true at all.
No one's writing roles for the sexy 50-year-old women.
This, yeah. And well, and what's funny about that, you know, is that whenever there is a usually they're specialty films starring older people, they do very, very well. All of the data, there's always every couple of years there's some, you know, variety piece that analyzes this, and there's these breakout hits. Victoria and Abdul is a breakout right now. There's The Lovers. Yeah, and it's consistent. Again, it's, you know, so there is a disconnect between that and, you know, when they do get pushed through, they seem to do well. So why aren't, it's the same thing with Stories for Women, why aren't there more actively, you know, there are more projects actively being pushed through? Because they make financial sense too. The audience is aging.
The audience is aging. I want to kind of make this.
And also the ones who actually go to the movies are the ones who always did go to the movies.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are older.
That's
Yes.
interesting. Interesting point. I'm going to turn this in. We've got a few minutes left here, and I want to ask us one question, then do some Q&A here. But I would like everyone to answer this, and I'm going to get a little personal. I did this last panel, which is to describe to describe a point in your career, because clearly all of you ladies have made it to where you are now, where you were at that crossroads where you felt like, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to do this, barrier, roadblock after roadblock. If you can describe a situation or a point in your life where you had to make a decision to either continue on, because you're here, so you made that decision. I just wanted you to share with the rest of the audience here what that experience was. What was the experience, and how did you get through that?
I started my career as an actor, and it's funny that Harvey Weinstein is in the news, because that stuff goes on, and I experienced it firsthand and had to make my way out of some really tricky scenarios, and ultimately, that was one of many factors that made me decide I didn't want to be an actor anymore. I wanted to work on the business side. But yeah, that was a really tough decision, and it's something that, you know, this headline is really resonating with me, and my heart goes out to a lot of young, you know, any actress who is put, or actor for that matter, who's put in that type of scenario. It's a really tough one, and it's demoralizing, but fortunately there are more good apples than bad apples.
And how did you, and so you made it through by?
I made it through by ultimately having a little pivot in my career. You know, that was one of many factors of why I stopped acting. But now when whenever I'm counseling actresses, you know, that's something I definitely bring up with them and say, hey, if you're ever in this situation, give me a call. Let me help you through it, because it's a real thing.
Thank you.
Well, throughout my career, I have been downsized, let go, fired on so many occasions. So every single time it happens, I always have a crisis in terms of, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And I hide in my cave for a long time, and I eventually emerge, and I think it's because I can't not do it. That I take the trust and responsibility that people have given to me so seriously, and I feel that part of my purpose in life is to help others get across the finish line, and that's sacred to me. And so I feel like whether it's with my family or with the writers or directors or actors that I work with, that I want to honor that commitment, and so that's what pulls me out of my cave.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful story. My education, I went to the Peter Stark program at USC, which is very expensive. And I started at Fox. I met my husband there. He was my first and last showmance. And I went to Fox, I did the studio thing. It was a little soul-sucking for me, so I decided I wanted to go and do the indie route, and then the stock market crashed, and everyone took their disposable income and ran for the hills. And in that, I had a 6-month-old daughter, I was looking around and I was like, well, maybe this is a sign that I'm meant to be a stay-at-home mom. And my husband told me I was, in no uncertain terms, crazy. I'm a wonderful mother, but not good at staying at home. And which was really great of him to do. And we recognized in each other early on that we're what we call affectionately carny folk. We're modern day carnies. In that there's no carnival to travel with, so we join film and television. And we thrive on it, and we go through the roller coaster of it, but there's no place I'd rather be. So. Thank you.
So 2.5 years ago, I was in a crisis situation with my Lily Ledbetter film with one of these producers that I'm no longer connected with. And she's an Academy Award-winning producer and one of the most prominent women producers in Hollywood, and I was honored to be working with her. And I attached a double Academy Award-winning actor to the film, and the three of us went out, and they turned on me, and they basically said, yeah, we really want to make this movie, but you're not going to direct it. And not only that, we don't even want you on the set. We want your movie. Goodbye. And you know, there was a moment when I was seriously considering it. Wouldn't all of you? I mean, to get your movie made, you know, major movie star, major producer. And I met this lovely woman who's sitting right over there, Iram, who introduced me to a group of incredible young filmmakers. And I sat in a room of, I don't know, 70 sweaty young women who all said, are you fucking nuts? No, they cannot have your movie. And I was empowered, and Iram said, listen, I don't want to be you when I'm your age. You have got to stop this and shut this nonsense down now, because if you don't do it, it's never going to end. And she empowered me. So I hope you're right, Iram.
That's a hard story to follow. Yeah, I want to actually mirror off of that, because I think that every day is a challenge in this business, whether you're a woman or not. It's hard to get, at least on the feature side, it's hard to get movies made. And I think one of the things, when I was at film school, I was told by one of my teachers that because I was a woman, I'd be having kids and be done after I got out of film school. I was literally, like, I was trying to, actually at that point I wanted to be a DP, and I was in cinematography class, and my teacher said, you're done. Like, this isn't for you. And I was just like, well, I'm going to persevere and prove you wrong. So that's my story, and that's why I'm still here.
Well, my story is a little different. I was a partners in a company with two other men, and one of them was a friend of mine, and he's who brought me in. But after about a year or so, I realized the power dynamic was not right. I was the one with bringing all of the experience, but he was taking away my credits and trying to take over. And it took me a while to figure out how do I get out of this, because it was also following the recession. I was happy to have a paycheck, a job. There were a lot of ways I could have just sort of rationalized in my head and just, you know, put your head down and make do, which I think I had sometimes done before in a, you know, studio background. But I regrouped, and I really decided to advocate for myself and to fight back, really. And you know, I went to the other partner, and we ended up branching out ourselves. So it was really that decision to either I felt like there was a, you know, sort of pivotal moment. Like, either I step up, and even though it's uncomfortable and I don't love confrontation and everything, go do and kind of in a sense behave the way he did, except I have the backup for it, you know. So I kind of modeled, this is what a guy would do in this situation, and that really, really helped.
For me, I have a sort of an obvious one, and that was my decision to leave Paramount. But after I just tell you that, I have a little other one as well. That was difficult for me. I had not been at Paramount for very long, and right away I was fairly unhappy for a lot of reasons, most of them to do with just the nature of the job that I was in. I kind of went in a vacuum, not knowing what this job was going to be, and it was much more administrative than I expected it to be, and the position that I went in at I did not know was going to be just not, it doesn't fit into the corporate structure. It's something kind of only in casting, and nobody knows what to do with it, and you don't get invited to things, and you don't get this, you just don't get anything, it's just, and I, at 3 months, I said, I gotta give it 6 months. It's not fair to my boss, it's not fair to anybody, I have to give it 6 months, and at 6 months I went, I have to give it a full year. But the whole while, I just knew it was not the job for me. And right at that year's time, I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to love, I don't mind working an 80, 90-hour week, but I have to love what I'm doing if I'm gonna give up so much of my life to the job. And not enough had changed over that year of things that I had asked for, wanted, or needed. And I just was like, it's a recession. I'm giving up a paycheck. I'm giving up a free phone. I'm giving up, somebody paying for all my movies and my plays and my, everything. And I'm going to go out on my own. And I have no clue if there's anyone who's going to hire me, but I just have to take control of my career myself and do this for me. And I don't know, I can always come back if I have to or something, That was sort of that's the obvious one, that's the major one. But there was a little one that happened shortly into my independent career, and that was a mentor, a casting director who's been an independent casting director. He's rarely done a big studio movie. His bread and butter for decades has been independent films, smaller budgeted or decent budgeted independent films. And I happened to be working out of his office on a different movie. We were sort of sharing space. And I was, I was only just starting to incorporate an agent into my life to help me through my deals. And he gave me an education on deal making for myself. I deal make for actors. And I know how to negotiate actor deals so that everybody wins a little something, and both sides, because you're hired by one, but you also you do business with the other. So, but I guess I was really terrible at negotiating for myself, and I just love him to death to this day. He gave me an education about how to put a monetary value on my time. And it's something now I'm educating my own brother about.
Thank you. I know we are running out of time, and I really wanted to get some Q&A, so we'll have to do that after the official end. I'm getting the signal. But one thing I wanted to do before we left here last time I did this panel, I just read a quick little excerpt. And I want to read it again because I think it's timely, and also can echo kind of what we need to do moving forward here. And it goes something like this. The entrance into the world of so-called social problems must be met with quiet laughter or not at all. The hollow men of anger and bitterness, the bountiful ladies of righteous degradation, all must be left to a bygone age. All the purpose of history is to provide a receptacle for all those myths and oddments which oddly we have acquired and from which we would become unburdened to create a newer world, to translate the future into the past, and we have no need of false revolutions. In a world where categories tend to tyrannize our minds and hang our wills up on narrow pegs, it is well at every given moment to seek the limits of our lives, and once those limits are understood, to understand that limitations no longer exist. Earth could be fair. And you and I must be free, not to save the world in a glorious crusade, not to kill ourselves with a nameless gnawing pain, but to practice with all the skill of our being, the art of making possible. So I want to say thank you to this amazing panel. And you're welcome. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Whose quote was that?
Yes. That was a commencement speech, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Yes.
And yes.
You were absolutely